I'm sure each and every one of you recognizes that sound. So, I'm a pretty big Star Wars fan. Some of you who are familiar with me might know that. And there's just something about being on a ship that you can walk around on, flying through space with different rooms, different positions and roles that's just so cool and satisfying to me. Someone flying, someone manning turrets, someone fixing engines. It's a romanticized dynamic that I look for in my media and entertainment. The Millennium Falcon, the Ebon Hawk, the Ghost, these are some of my favorite vehicles in the franchise because of that aspect. When an experience can scratch that itch of a large multi-crew vehicle with each member having distinct roles, damn man.
This some serious gourmet shit.
That's a big reason why I played Sea of Thieves so much back in the day. It perfectly encapsulates that type of gameplay. The coordination, command structure, and teamwork to fully and effectively operate a galleon in a PvP setting is some of my favorite kind of content. Now, I'm sure you could tell where I'm going with this. The AC-130 is the modern day airborne example of that. Hell, it even has cannons on the side, just like a flying pirate ship. Ever since I learned about what it was, which was probably COD 4, I can't think of a time before that when I had ever heard about it.
I see lots of little pieces down there.
It's been one of my favorite aircraft. I mean, dude, a big plane with a cannon on the side, and not just like an autocannon, it has that too, but like an artillery piece. And it just circles shit like a shark and bullies it into submission. Sign me the fuck up. This batshit crazy idea came from a place a lot of batshit crazy ideas came from, the 1960s, specifically Vietnam. See, the Vietnam War was very similar to the conflicts in the Middle East during the 2000s and 2010s, a war against a mostly insurgent or local militia force, not against a standing army. Sure, there were fights against the proper North Vietnamese army, but a lot of it was with the Viet Cong, which are mostly just villagers fighting to harass US troops. No air force, no tanks, just some poopy sticks, an AK, and a pocket full of dreams. Because of this, most airstrikes would be against soft targets like dug-in infantry. So the American military wanted a new close air support or CAS weapons platform to help their forces push through dug-in local fighters. They had the A-1 Sky Raider and the F-4 Phantom, but these weren't really up to the task of hanging around for long periods. They were more of a drop your load and hit the road kind of deal. They started using the UH-1 Huey, the main transport helicopter for the Army, by attaching dumbfire rockets and mounting machine guns to the side doors. After it dropped off a load of troops, it could stick around and provide covering fire and fire support to the dismounted infantry. However, it wasn't purpose-built for that kind of work. It was pretty big, lightly armored, and usually flying very low, very slow, or even just hovering, making it an easy target for small arms fire and RPG rounds from the VC. Also, side note, everyone thinks RPG stands for Rocket Propelled Grenade, but it doesn't. It stands for
Ручной противотанковый гранатомет,
which translates to Handheld Anti-Tank Grenade Launcher. Like, I get why you might think it's Rocket Propelled Grenade, but anyway, side ran over. Helicopters certainly have their place in close air support, and the UH-1 would eventually be reworked into the AH-1 Cobra, which is purpose-built for CAS. But before that, someone smoked a shitload of weed and thought, what if we had a plane that could, like, hang out way out of range of the AKs and role-playing games, and it would shoot guns out the side of it at the stuff. So they grabbed a C-47 Skytrain, slapped an A on the front of it, loaded it with 3 7.62 miniguns, pointed them out the window, flew around a battle, and just unloaded. And with that toke of a joint, the AC-47 Spooky was born. Do you know what? Somehow this shit fucking worked. I mean, it wasn't perfect. The gunners had to sight by eye. The base C-47 didn't have much fuel and therefore couldn't loiter for too long. There wasn't room in the plane for much ammo. For safety, it had to fly mostly at night, but the proof of concept was there. After upgrading to a line of cocaine, they figured bigger was better, and they did the same thing, but less jank, to a C-130 Hercules, the medium cargo aircraft of the day. And also of today, I guess. They're still kicking. The C-130 had more room for ammo, more fuel, longer range and loiter times, and could fit more weapons. It was also considerably more modern for the time, and apparently they chose well because they are still using AC-130s to this day. After Vietnam, they were used in South and Central America in the late 70s to the end of the 80s, and of course used extensively in the Middle East since the 1990s, with the most recent confirmed AC-130 mission being in late 2023. So, when exactly would you call an AC-130? It actually has a lot of the same shortcomings the A-10 had, which I talked about in its own video. The main issue is that it is a very easy target. It's big, it's slow, it has a huge radar cross-section. I mean, look at it, it's a cargo transport, not a fighter. So, if there are any fighters in the area, it's cooked. Radar SAM sites, cooked. AAA, cooked. I know we've all seen the giant flare angel wings thingy, but that'll only save you from IR missiles, and more advanced IR missiles will ignore that shit. It can pretty much only operate in sanitized airspace, and usually does so at night. But just like Vietnam, it's been mostly used against insurgent forces, you know, pissed off dudes with small arms, maybe some mounted AT stuff, the obligatory Toyota pickup, but nothing crazy. No hostile jets or S-400s. And for that role, it's amazing. It has a reputation of being used alongside special forces, but it has also been used to assist regular ground troops too. There's not even many AC-130s out there, like 3 dozen or so of the only active model at this moment, so it's not like an F-35 where there's literally 1,000 of them. There are more AC-130Js than Su-57s though, so I'll take the opportunity just to shit on that thing for a second. It's used in CAS missions, recon, and direct ground attack, air interdiction, that kind of stuff. All of the main guns are located on the left side of the airframe, and the tactic it uses is called a pylon turn. It's a turn that comes from
old-timey air races,
where a pylon on the ground would mark a turn in the track, and the race planes would roll so that the wing is pointed directly at the pylon for the duration of the turn for the most optimal maneuver. The AC-130 does the same maneuver, although at a much higher altitude and for a much longer arc, with its wing pointed directly at the target area. This way, the guns on the side are always pointed towards the place where they got to put the boom. It doesn't have to pylon turn, but it's definitely the most effective usage of the plane, and certainly the iconic way it's depicted in media. Now, it isn't all perfect with the AC-130. As I'm sure you will remember in my last video, we talked about another beloved plane with an iconic gun that had its fair share of problems, and the AC-130 is no different. In one of the worst cases of mistaken target identity that I've come across for any US aircraft, the AC-130 was tasked with striking a building that was believed to be a base of operations for enemy combatants in Afghanistan in 2015. However, the building that was marked as the target was in fact a hospital from which Doctors Without Borders was operating. The AC-130 opened fire, killing about 40 civilians and injuring dozens more. 16 military personnel were punished internally. I'm not sure if it was bad intel, miscommunication, or an error in target ID on the plane itself, but it was an absolute tragedy. In addition to that incident, the crews of older AC-130s are highly prone to cancer and have been medically retired earlier than the average service member. The cause for this is theorized to be from breathing in chemicals in the propellant left behind from spent shells while in a confined space. I can say from my research for this video, I did not find any PPE that would prevent such a thing from happening on current AC-130 flights, which sucks. With all that out of the way, let's talk about the aircraft itself, about all the different variants and weapons it uses. It has a crew of anywhere between 7 and 14 depending on the variant and even the flight. Usually 2 pilots, a navigator, a few loaders, 2 combat system officers, and a few other support personnel. It's about 100 feet long, 130 feet wide, and 40 feet tall. It's actually almost exactly as big as a D-77 Pelican. It has 4 engines, which can vary depending on the model. As they became available, FLIR targeting pods were added to help with targeting and recon, sometimes even having multiple pods mounted on the front and side of the plane, again depending on the model. Speaking of models, there's actually a lot more than I thought. This thing has been through more iterations than most military aircraft, starting with the AC-130A Spectre, which is mounted with 4 7.62 miniguns and 4 20mm M61 Vulcan rotary autocannons, taking the phrase gunship kinda literally. Next is the AC-130E, also called the Spectre, which still rocked 2 miniguns, 2 Vulcans, but added 2 40mm L60 Bofors cannons.
both of these nuts,
which came right out of World War II. The AC-130H, also Spectre, loaded up with 2 miniguns, a Bofors, and the M102 105mm howitzer. And even later configured for the H, dropped the 2 miniguns. The most iconic version we all know and love, the AC-130U Spooky, has the very familiar 25mm G.A.W.X equalizer, a 5-barreled rotary autocannon, the 40mm Bofors, and the 105mm howitzer. The newer AC-130W Stinger retained the howitzer, but is also the first to try out the GAU-23A Bushmaster 30mm autocannon. While smaller in diameter than the Bofors, parts and ammo were becoming quite the side quest for the Air Force. The 30mm also proved to be what the crews called sniper accurate. So while not packing the same punch as the 40mm, it's much more effective. The most recent version, the AC-130J Ghost Rider, packs both the 30 and 105mm, but also carries AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, several models of small diameter glide bombs such as GBU-39s and 53s under the wings, and has a large tube out the rear for AGM-176 Griffin missiles and GBU-44 Vipers. Also, damn, all these planes' nicknames are fucking cool. There were plans for DEW or directed energy weapons, aka freaking laser beams, to be added to the J models, but earlier in 2024 the project was canceled. Can't have shit out here, man. Inside the plane, the loaders usually sit at the back to load the 105, as the autocannon can be loaded with 2 feed trays with 2 different kinds of ammo preloaded. In the middle of the plane is a TV station where the triggerman will sit. Obviously, the pilots and navigators are up front where they would usually be. The left pilot has a sideways HUD looking towards where the gun is firing to help keep the wing pointed at the right spot on the ground and to help with his situational awareness. That's your history lesson for now, kids. Now let's talk about video games. I actually had a harder time getting a good list together for this one, and some of these suck, like bad, but we're gonna get through them. As with the F-35 video, some of these are mods or user-generated content, but I feel like they're worth mentioning. So let's dive in. So, the base game of Arma 3 has an AC-130-ish type thing. It actually reminds me a lot of the AV-42C and the A-10C comparison I made last video, right down to the VTOL ability. The AV-44X Blackfish is a heavy lift cargo vehicle that's had 3 weapons slapped on the side, just like an AC-130. It sports 20mm, 40mm, and 105mm. It can also use its VTOL abilities to hover, which can be used in place of the pylon turn. Although a pylon turn is also an effective tactic used for this aircraft. It needs a minimum of 2 crew to operate, but 4 makes it much more usable, as the weapons require 2 gunners. I love the look of this thing. It really gives off D-77 Pelican vibes and is actually of similar size, just like the C-130. The troop carrier version of the Blackfish is basically just a Pelican. It certainly fits in the near future setting of the base game Arma, and it's definitely one of my favorite things to fly, even if it is big and bulky. Again, it isn't an AC-130 in the purest of forms, but I think it certainly deserves a place on the list, so I guess it makes sense to get it out of the way. Huge shout out to Gaslighting Inc. for inviting me to their server and flying around with me. I could not have done this without you guys.
Into the mouth. Nice.
They did it. They actually did it. They made me not like Ace Combat.
I've heard a lot about Ace Combat Assault Horizon just in passing, but man,
I had no idea it was as bad as it was. In fact, there are 2 and only 2 redeeming qualities about this game at all. We'll touch on them later. The writing and characters are generic, boring, and oh my god, guts! They added this dog shit semi-on-rails mechanic called DFM or dogfight mode, where you have to get behind enemy planes, lock into the mode, and then just try and shoot them while not really flying your plane. I know Ace Combat is supposed to be arcade-ish, but this literally feels like a light gun game in an arcade. I was also told that your plane's gun will do exactly 0 damage to enemies unless in this mode. Either enemy planes can dodge super well or your missiles suck, but either way, I found myself missing almost all of my Fox 2s, and I believe this was intentional, so you're pushed into using DFM. The missions are also way too long for what they are. They definitely don't earn this kind of time sink. It's just not fun. Steam actually took this game down, so I had to go to G2A, a store I hate, in order to play it. But the reason we're here is because Ace Combat Assault Horizons has an AC-130 mission. Now, Call of Duty Modern Warfare had come out just a few years prior with its iconic AC-130 mission and kill streak. It's pretty obvious all of Assault Horizons would made to cash in on COD Fever. Fuck it, man, it doesn't even take place in Strange Real. The first mission is in Florida. Anyway, the AC-130 in this game is trash. The whole mission is trash. I was laughing out loud about how dumb some of the things in here are. First off, it has a 120 20mm cannon, something no AC-130 has, along with a 40mm bowfirst that isn't fully automatic, and a 25mm rotary cannon. The thermal imaging is pretty much just a weird filter over the color version of the level, and enemies will just pop up as white when the game wants you to shoot at them. Worth noting that if you're looking, you can actually spot them before they turn on. And this isn't just for dismounts. Vehicles and even buildings will do this too. It's insane. The gimbal limit is very limited, to the point where the game will want you to shoot at something or see a story beat happening on the ground, and you just can't because the camera won't go that far. As long as we're talking shit on the camera, you can't lock it to terrain. It's just always moving. The game also does this trope that started in COD 4, where the zoom level is determined by what weapon you have selected, which is just dumb. The big cannon is zoomed all the way out, the 40mm is zoomed in a bit, and the 25mm is zoomed in so far I can count the enemy's fingers. There's also very minimal travel time for your shots. It feels like you're about 300 feet up in the air.
And I would be doing you a disservice to not mention that at the end of the mission, the plane experiences turbulence and shakes your camera around.
Now, I said there are two redeeming qualities to this game, and the AC-130 in particular. First, they gave the plane a mustache that can catch balloons, which is a real thing that was developed to pull personnel or cargo out of hot zones without landing, and was even in the Dark Knight. Second is... But that's it. The game sucks, and I hate it. It features, without a doubt, the worst AC-130 in gaming.
Son, where'd you find this?
Okay, it's childish, can't be no homegirl dropping like the NASDAQ. Move white girls like this coke up my ass crack. Move black girls, cause man, fuck it, I'll do either. I love pussy, I love bitches, dude, I should be running Peter in Adidas with some short shorts. B-O-O all over me, my green is where it's supposed to be. Your green is in my grocery, this Asian dude, I stole his girl, and now he got that Koji beat my...
And thank God that Ace Combat Assault Horizons is the worst AC-130, because if it wasn't, it'd be Tom Clancy's. I remember playing H.A.W.X 1 back in the day on my Xbox 360. I even got this shitty little HOTAS they made just for the game, and honestly, it wasn't the worst. I remember it being kind of like Ace Combat, but it had co-op multiplayer over Xbox Live, and I bullied one of my friends into getting it with me. However, H.A.W.X 2 on PC is far from a good experience. I have two good things to say about this game, and that's A, every mission showcases a new aircraft, and B, the missions don't overstay their welcome like they did in Assault Horizons. But that's it. The controls on the PC port hardly worked, even when I remapped them. The PC port in general was difficult to get a hold of. I had to go back to G2A because, like Assault Horizons, Steam had delisted the game years ago. Thankfully, the AC-130 mission was very early, the fourth or so mission, so about 20 minutes into the game. Now, the entire mission here takes place in regular color vision. No flare to be found. It has you escorting a Special Forces platoon conducting a rescue mission for a downed pilot. I'm not 100% sure, actually. The story was pretty hard to follow. Like last time, you can't lock the gimbal of the targeting pod to the ground, so your crosshair is constantly moving with the plane. I will say you appear to be at a more appropriate altitude this time around, but still relatively low on a realistic scale. The shot travel time definitely feels better. They actually labeled your big gun as a 105, but this thing produces a massive mushroom cloud, and the splash damage goes on for days. You have limited ammo, and it seems to be on the lower side. It's a bit ridiculous that no one ever shoots at you, even though you see enemy helicopters very close to you. You also take out entire warships without a single shot being fired at you. Even with all its faults, it was 100% the best mission of the game, at least up to as far as I played. It wasn't good by any means, but it sure as hell beat Ace Combat.
Wow. Fucking disgusting.
Alright, we'll make this one short. Battlefield has had an AC-130 in both 3 and 4, and 4 is the one we're looking at today. Let me tell you, It's a bit of a headache to get going. Battlefield 4 has this commander role, and I remember you being able to even play it on a phone or tablet. It was a big part of the marketing. The commander call in different support elements depending on what objective you had captured. It's not like in Squad though. The commander wasn't a player with a gun. He just looked at the map. One of the things you could call in was an AC-130. It has one gunner per weapon and has an autopilot, so it's just on rails. It's your iconic spooky variant with the big old boom, poof, poof, burt, and it can get shot down almost right away if there's AA or enemy bandits. But if it goes uncontested on the map, it can be pretty devastating. It's rare, it's kind of neat, but that's about it.
You weird, buddy. You're weird.
Kerbal Space Program, for those of you that don't know, is absolutely goated. It's actually one of my most played games of all time. It's not so much a flight sim as it is a NASA sim. This game has an entire solar system built into it, and that's even more impressive considering it's built in Unity. A sequel came out a while back, but that's a whole can of worms I'm not getting into. The base gameplay here is to build vehicles. You can, if you want, send said vehicles to other planets. Rockets, rovers, drones, bases, planes, hell, even boats. Worth saying, the mods for KSP can be incredible, fully changing the game. For example, a funny little Baja man made a mod called BD Armory, which added military weapons to KSP. Yes, that funny little Baja man. Hell, some of the models in BD Armory went into VTOL VR. And you can do all the normal wacky Kerbal stuff with said weapons. Using this mod and a few others, we can make our own functioning AC-130. Let's call our new variant the AC-130 Jebediah. It comes equipped with an M61 Vulcan in 20mm, the M230 chain gun in 30mm, and the 105 howitzer. I decided to slap on some laser-guided missiles on the wings, just like the AC-130J, but they're full AGM-65 Mavericks rather than Hellfires. It comes with the targeting pod, and you know what? Fuck it. We finally have the laser-mounted gunship. I tried my best with the flares, but it looks more like a butthole than wings. This thing cheats a little bit in that it's way more fast and maneuverable than its real-world counterpart, and because of that, this thing fucks pretty hard. The howitzer projectiles seem to be bugged, or it isn't equipped with a heat round. It just seems to disappear on the ground. Both the smaller guns and the missiles tear it up though. They're very effective. I love the range this game has. If you've never picked up KSP, I cannot recommend it enough. Not only is it fun, but it teaches you things too. Funny frogmen make me happy.
This right here is my favorite thing ever. In the history of forever. I think about this every day. I think about this all night long. I stay awake, not sleeping, because I'm thinking about this.
Simple Planes, for those of you that don't know, is an offshoot to Simple Rockets, which was intended as a competitor to Kerbal Space Program. It allows users to make planes with simple looking yet surprisingly robust controls. It's a bit more advanced than what you can do in KSP, but not as complex as something like Flyout. A lot of users remake versions of real aircraft, and the AC-130 is no exception. Now, the main reason I'm covering this is because you can play in VR. If you let me duct tape a TV to my eyeballs to play your game, I automatically like it more. Now, the model in question we're looking at here comes with two 20mm Gatling guns, a 40mm, and 105mm. Pretty standard. You can sit in either the pilot or co-pilot seat, the flight engineer seat, multiple external views, the refueling receptacle, or the gunner seat, which, by the way, just puts your head where the targeting pod is. The cockpit does have switches you can reach out and touch, and you can fly the plane with the yoke by hand. But to fly from any other seat the game allows you to man, you have to use the basic controls like your VR controller's joysticks and buttons. When you have the weapons selected, you aim them with a transparent arc that shows the projectile's predicted path. This seems kind of jank, but it works well enough. Dare I say, it's even kind of fun. I got this version on Steam, but it is also available on standalone headsets, so it's not a terrible option if you want to fly VR on the go.
It was pretty good. It was all right. It wasn't great, but it was fine.
DCS actually has a C-130 module coming out soon, but until then we're stuck with an unofficial mod. And man, of all the unofficial mods I've seen so far, this is the best one I've tried out. It's not a full fidelity C-130, but it's pretty damn close, like maybe 80-90%. And you can turn it into an AC-130. Now, there's a lot to be desired here. Maybe I'm wrong, but there doesn't seem to be any kind of flare. You can take a seat that has a POV over the main cannon, or you can look out the side of the cockpit, but that's it for targeting. Once you turn on the weapon systems, you even get 3 reticles for the 3 guns, but the only one you can aim is the 105. The 30mm and 20mm are dependent entirely on the bank of the plane as far as I can tell, but it handles like a C-130 pretty well. The only targeting pod it shows is on the nose, none on the side, and the pilot doesn't get that cool sideways HUD either. But seeing as this is a C-130 mod with the A tacked on, I'll give it a slide. I wasn't able to test multiplayer, but I have seen reports that the multi-crew functionality isn't working anyway. If the only thing you play is DCS, give it a shot. It's kind of cool, at least until the official C-130 module drops.
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
Loaders, get your rounds in the can. Yes, Commander. Nav, set a heading for that compound.
Roger.
Fire officer, keep a hand on that hot switch. We're just getting started here.
Solid copy.
Pilot, you have the con. Once on station, circle the target. Bring us around.
Sir.
Com, get me General Shepard.
Raj, stand by. Shepard's up, sir.
Gold Eagle Actual, this is H.A.W.X. How copy?
Loud and clear, Shadow 1. Send traffic.
I had to bail your boys out. Luckily, they have friends in high places.
That's what you're there for. Tell me something good.
We got a hit on Hassan. Approaching the target location now. We'll get this bastard rolled up for a little talking to.
That's what I like to hear. Report back when Hassan's in the bag.
Roger that. Out here. All Shadows, listen up. These guys on the ground, Mexican Special Forces, 141, they are your brothers now. You treat them like your own. And let's get this done, yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Ghost, this is Shadow 1, orbiting the compound now. Standing by for visual.
All right, say it with me.
Enemy AC-130 above! 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 Enemy AC-130 above!
That last one just hits different, doesn't it? Random Call of Duty voice actor, if you're watching this, thank you. The AC-130 has been a staple of COD since Modern Warfare in 2007 and has appeared in the majority of games since. At the very least, almost all the ones set in our present timeline or a realistic setting. We're going to be looking at the single player mission in Modern Warfare 2 2022 today. Now, it's not really an AC-130. For some reason, maybe licensing, the plane is drastically different from a real Hercules. The front of the plane is a bit angular and the wings are slightly angled downwards like on a C-17 or C-5, and they're sporting winglets. But in practice, it's pretty much an AC-130. There's an odd mismatch in terms of weapon. It sports a 25mm rotary cannon, the 30mm Bushmaster, and Hellfire missiles, a configuration that doesn't exist in the real world. All that aside, this is the iconic AC-130 support mission. Special Forces raiding a compound, extracting an HVT, and retreating to an extract point, all while needing cover fire and recon. And it's actually pretty fun and intense. The specifics of the plane and the weapons might be a bit off, but it's probably the best of these one-off side missions we've talked about so far. The rebooted Modern Warfare 1 and 2 single-player experiences are both very good, and if you haven't played them yet, I recommend them, and this mission in particular. Modern Warfare 2019 has been my favorite PvP shooter in recent memory. 3? Skip that one, you're not missing much.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
I didn't go to Vietnam just to have pansies like you take my freedom away from me.
You went to Vietnam in 1993 to open up a sweatshop.
And a lot of good men died in that sweatshop.
Oh my God, you're out of your mind.
Look.
I heard about this game a while back, and from my understanding, development has slowed. I actually thought it was abandoned, but I've been informed that the dev is getting back into the swing of it. You can, at the time of writing, still get it on Steam for around $15 if you're interested. It definitely plays like an early access demo. There's no real campaign, just a dozen or so scenarios to load up across 4 maps. It does very faithfully recreate every variant of the AC-130, so there's some variety based on what ship you take. The entire game is played through the FLIR or night vision, no color to be found sound, and no cabin view. You can very clearly see the edge of each map. I guess they're all about a square kilometer. The camera, again, doesn't lock onto terrain unless you hold T, but that locks the camera, period, and you can't move it when this is activated. The default camera movement is a simulated joystick where you kind of drag it around with the mouse, and personally, this style of control just wasn't it for me. There's an option to switch it over to a more conventional mouse control, thankfully. I appreciate the attention to detail in the few scenarios that are presented. The more scripted ones feature surprisingly good voice actors to communicate over the radio. Car engines will glow on the FLIR when they're started. The Vietnam era missions feature regular night vision rather than FLIR, and the HUD looks accurate to what I've seen in the real world. While this isn't the AC-130 game with an entire campaign with you as the gunship's triggerman, this is a solid, accurate representation of the experience for pretty cheap.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Okay, this game is fucking cool. I really wish this kind of gameplay was ported over to VTOL VR in some way. The vibes are very similar. It's like if VTOL and Five Nights had a baby. Angel of Death is an indie project that lets you be an AC-130 gunner in VR. Just like in VTOL, you can reach out and touch all the switches you see in the cabin to operate the systems of the gunner position. It's still in very early stages. The demo isn't even up on Steam at the moment. The only real scripted content is a tutorial, and there's a little segment where you protect some dudes from zombies, which is actually something that's in Project Gunship too. You can play it flat screen too if you want to check it out and don't have a toaster to slap on your face. The link to the Discord for the game is down in the description, and please show these guys some love. I'd be stoked to see this thing turn into a bigger project.
For a brick, he flew pretty good.
God damn it, Arma. When I started thinking about this video, this was the first one that came to mind other than Call of Duty. I've played around with this a bit in single player scenarios before, and yeah, turns out this is the best AC-130 in gaming for a couple reasons. For one, every station on this thing can be managed by a person. You can have a full crew on this thing: pilot, co-pilot, EW officer, navigator, weapons system officer, etc. While that sounds all good and fun, you can actually pretty much solo this thing too. The mod creators had very wrinkly brains when they thought this up. As you get airborne, you can tell an autopilot where to perform a pylon turn. You can choose the orbit point, target altitude, target speed, and what direction you want to turn. And here's a hint: you want it to turn counterclockwise, otherwise your weapons aren't pointed at the ground. And the autopilot is actually very reliable in achieving the orbit you want, which frees you up to fire the guns. The targeting pod works much like the other ones in Arma, but since you don't have to fly the plane, it's actually not a big deal. It does give you an indicator if your angle is out of the weapon's gimbal, which is super handy. You have to zero weapons too, which is the first time we've seen that mechanic in any of these games as far as I know. The plane in question is a spooky, so you have the classic 20mm, 40mm, and 105mm. The model looks incredible, especially for Arma, and the interior of the cargo bay is even represented. The weapons control center is just an empty box, but when you man the gun, you can see all the controls. Somehow, the USAF mod team has made the best AC-130 in gaming. I don't know how everybody else was able to fumble so bad, but these guys nailed it.
And I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Some closing thoughts on the AC-130, because I didn't have room to mention them earlier. I've heard stories, no idea if they're true or not, of former AC-130 gunners getting flashbacks and triggering PTSD episodes after seeing AC-130 gameplay, specifically from Call of Duty. Since it's already on a screen and the image in question is usually lower resolution, I could certainly see that being a possibility. It's become an iconic part of military games and real-world military aviation. There's such a small number of these planes out there flying missions that if you know you have one overhead looking out for you, it's something special. You know, I'm not sure the exact reason the AC-130 seems to have a better record than the A-10. Less overall airframes, the pylon turn versus strafing run, dedicated gunners. I can't say I'm not an expert, I'm just an idiot with a YouTube channel. But both the numbers and experience of service members supported by orbiting gunships seem to indicate that they did a much better job in terms of percentage, maybe not overall numbers, than the A-10 did. So it gets the very prestigious and rare award of better than the A-10. As always, thank you so much for watching. At the time of writing, about 5,000 of you have subscribed since I started this series, and I have a lot more planned. So if you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. I'm 100% sure I got stuff wrong. So if you notice something, please leave a comment letting me know, and I'll have a pinned comment with corrections down there too. Check out the F-35 and A-10 videos if you haven't already, and stay tuned for the next one. Take care.
Why are the wings coming out, man?